Welcome to the LoJo Show. It's all right. I'll get better at it. Should I just say it? There is no monopoly on good ideas when it comes to cybersecurity. Welcome to the LoJo Show. I'm your host, Louverture Jones. I'm the founder and managing partner at BlackRock Engineering and Technology. I have over 20 years of cybersecurity experience, and I am honored to bring some of that experience to you. I just want to thank Keith Walsh from Armis for coming on again to talk more about the OT journey. Today, we are going to talk about zero trust. Zero trust is a strategic approach to applying security within organizations or across really any IT environment or business. This strategic approach to cybersecurity will secure an organization by really eliminating what we call implicit trust. Okay, implicit trust means that right off the bat, you would come into an organization and you'd be trusted. You'd just be given a password and a username, and that's it. You're trusted. What zero trust does is it chops that into different trust areas. So you may be able to log in, but access has to be well defined and specifically defined to you in order to gain access to certain resources that an organization may have. All right, and we're back here with Keith Walsh from Armis here on the LoJo Show. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit about zero trust. Zero trust is getting a lot of attention just across industry. This is both in commercial, DoD, and government space as well. And it's not something that's new. It is a concept and design approach that's been around for quite some time. Only it's been fairly complicated to actually implement some of the principles of zero trust. And one of the things that we're going to get to go over with Keith Walsh today is some of the approaches there. How can businesses and everyday users implement zero trust in their environment, as well as zero trust, the future of security, and kind of discuss some of the ins and outs of that discussion there. So just for our users and stuff here, when we talk about zero trust, Keith, one of the things or one component of that was network segmentation. Another component of that was trust zones. And then, the other portion was infrastructure management. So if there's a couple of things or a couple of areas that you can touch on within zero trust, and in particular, kind of dropping it in some of those buckets there, those three buckets there, please go ahead. Give me a kind of an idea of what that really means now.
Yeah, thanks, Louverture, and great to be back with you this week. So you're absolutely right when you mentioned that, zero trust isn't new. Zero trust has actually been around since 2009. It was a concept founded by a Forrester gentleman, John Kindervag, and it was under the context and pretext of, never trust and always verify, which, what that really means is that, the devices and all their actions should really never be trusted, especially by default. And if they're connected to corporate networks, even if they've been previously verified, we need to continually verify the actual activities that those devices are attempting to engage in. So, conceptually, zero trust is it's a really big and nebulous framework that has been around 12, 13, 14 years or so. And to your point about zero trust and it getting some additional sort of momentum as of recently. A couple of years ago, NIST even put out a research paper around describing zero trust as a set of concepts and ideas. So how do how do you operationalize concepts and ideas? And then just last month, a couple of weeks ago, the Office of the President put out a directive around moving the U.S. government towards zero trust cybersecurity principles, in so much as even, we talk about trends and we talk about momentum, and as we enter into 2022, the Office of the President is now looking to leverage the security benefits of cloud-based infrastructures while mitigating those associated risks. So, I guess the answer to your question, what is zero trust? It's never trust, it's always verify, and it really starts with defining the protect surface. Doesn't have to be the entire organization, because that's like boiling the ocean. I mean, how would you layer in a zero trust architecture across a Fortune 50 organization. That's a big ask, right? So first step is all about, defining the protect surface, and then mapping those transactions to understand what these devices are and what are they connecting to, what boundaries are they crossing, and then ultimately identifying the protect surface after you understand what those devices are and the communications, the links, and the activities that they're engaging in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that used to be very prevalent when we would talk about zero trust, and both in industry as well as in DoD, is that legacy devices and legacy components and stuff that are out there can't support really that zero trust architecture and the overhead that comes along with that, as well as the control and monitoring that comes along with that. So I know some of our listeners definitely want to know, hey, with our disparate networks in some cases, and then interlinked networks and integrated networks and stuff there, where do you start? How do you start to really kind of implement zero trust when you have some of those challenges there?
Yeah, and it always starts with one common use case, which is, well, I need to identify my assets. I need a full catalog in real time. We're not talking about simply walking with a notepad and pen up and down a manufacturing line, and doing that walkthrough once a year. It's actually the real-time and continuous cataloging of devices as they come and go from our network. And that, Louverture, in and of itself, is the very first use case that needs to be solved to even undergo the conversation around, okay, how do I identify my protect surface? And then how do I actually take action on it by monitoring those connections? So I would suggest, step one is a full asset inventory of all wired and wireless devices as they communicate, so you can start down that OT, that zero trust journey in your OT environments.
Yeah, I think level setting, being able to level set that with customers or even with your organization of, look, there is really not an easy button to do this. There's not an easy button that you hit and this is magically done. There's, significant, investment in past and legacy investment in infrastructure, even on how you actually implement your workflow and your processes and operations as an organization. And when you talk zero trust, I mean, would you agree that it's going to impact both your processes, how you get things done in some cases, and even on how the behavior is of individuals and devices are going to be on that network that you have to make sure that's planned for? Is that one of the things that you find that kind of people struggle with initially of, yeah, we got some legwork to do. It's going to take some time to get it done, but the more you do now and get it done and then it's as accurate as possible and you're getting the inventory that you need, the better it's going to be in the future,
Yeah, again, this zero trust concept is this huge nebulous, living, breathing organism that really it's a huge collection of concepts and, again, ideas that includes everything from potentially certificates and public key and private key infrastructures and rotating, artifacts in and out of these devices to ensure they're authentic. It's everything from, dual factor authentication. It's everything from, and then you go up the stack into what do these devices talk to? What boundaries do they cross? How do I implement zero trust into my NAC, into my firewalls, right? So it's really this multifaceted effort that can seem quite ominous if you just sort of step back and look at what truly a successful zero trust engagement looks like. And I personally think, Louverture, that has, precluded some folks from even, dipping their toe in that water. But it's important to start somewhere, and you can take those little bitty steps, those baby steps to get started. And oftentimes our clients take the first step of the device discovery, right? Because without that, you then don't have that catalog. And especially, as we talk about the connections that those devices make, and you talk about the boundaries and the segmentation, which needs to be there to support zero trust, right? So there's many levers that need to be there to support zero trust. Those firewalls, those NACs, and building those boundaries and segments is a big part of zero trust. Being able to map those connections as those devices are being made, that's where we're defining the protect surface so that we can then go ahead and identify exactly the zero trust that you want to enable within that protect surface.
Yeah, one of the difficulties, that organizations run across too on this is, that definition of zero trust and some of the foundations and stuff that's established for it. We've heard, many companies over the past couple of years say, hey, we've got your zero trust implementation, right? Or we have zero trust integration and stuff from that. And we can see that there's a lot of confusion and stuff, both as far as when we speak to, CIOs and IT staff and stuff about that. And what does that really mean at that point? We mentioned several technologies here, firewalls being one of them, and the other one being, network admission control or network access control, from there, where you have something that's active, that's enforcing boundaries and trust boundaries there. But, one of the key components to this as well is things like your two-factor authentication, that component, and then also the things that the devices have, as well as even in the people and stuff too, when you talk about zero trust there. Shining a little bit of light as far as into some clarity into that area. One of the things that I heard someone once say, for me that really helped that organization was, look, you need to establish secure trust boundaries, right? And then it defined boundaries as, your network, your device, right? Your overall environment from there, and then also the people, as far as establishing those trust boundaries in that regard. Is that something that you find that even in the OT side, that's a struggle to kind of get a handle on? And how do you guys normally approach that from your end?
Yeah, it certainly is. And what you're really, building a foray into is really the second step of this zero trust framework, which is mapping the transactions in and out of the defined protect surface. So, if that defined protect surface is, maybe it's a PLC network, in our manufacturing facility, maybe it's a set of control valves within a midstream pipeline, maybe it's an entire compressor station. Within a midstream, after we identify what that protect surface is, we now need to map those transactions. The Google Maps of today is all about context, because context matters. And that goes into the answer to your question about how do I bring all of these different facets of what it means to embark in zero trust, with the authentication of users, the authentication of machines, the connections that they make, the protocols that they use, the boundaries that they cross. In the Google Maps analogy, if we want to get from my house to your house, we're going to see everything about the traffic. We're going to see everything about the endpoints, the elevation of those endpoints. We're going to see everything about what I'm going to cross along the way, whether it's gas stations and grocery stores and cleaners, right? We're going to have full context of speed limits and traffic movement simply to get from my house to your house. Well, that's what Armis brings to the table when we talk about this second step of zero trust, which is I need to map these transactions, but inclusive of those transactions, it's not simply just a SCADA server talking to a distributed device, a PLC of sorts. It's all the context of that information. Is that an authenticated user? Is that a valid user? Is that a valid IP? Is that a valid machine? Is that machine using valid software that's been authenticated and it's been loaded? Is it unauthorized software? Tell me about that connection. Is it crossing a boundary? What boundaries is it crossing to get to that end OT or ICS device it's attempting to get to? Is the device that it's attempting to get to and the commands, the CNC commands, the command and control commands that it's sending into that device, are those authorized commands? Because context matters. So, we draw a parallel to what Armis brings in, in the world of understanding the framework of what zero trust needs to deliver, the context of what those connections are and who's making them, the boundaries that they're crossing, and really the most the most interesting parallel that there is the difference between those paper maps from 20 years ago to where Google Maps is today, because it's the context that matters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think one of the things that you're referring to those maps of yesteryear and stuff on that. One of the things that used to be that used to be very frustrating is if you went the wrong way, right? Let's say you miss that turn, right? There's no rerouting, right? The rerouting and stuff was not there, right? The context as far as on why, okay, you've made this turn, now what? That wasn't there anymore. that wasn't there back then. Being able to have that full context of, let's say, you've got an entity. That entity could be a person. That entity could be a thing. In that case, that entity could be what it's sharing as well within that. So zero trust, and when you apply it and you apply it to different levels and components of that, it begins to give you that, it begins to give you that, one, the context that you need to understand whether you are in danger or are in the right and consistent, running, form in that case, or operations, versus one in which you're operating more at risk. And that is because of the knowledge that you have, regarding the assets that you have, the reason why those assets are there, and what's actually predictable functionality for those assets, including the data and who's actually integrating with that data or working with that data.
Yeah, and you bring up a really interesting point, which is, in the yesteryears, if you took a wrong turn and you didn't look at your map, you had no idea, and you're going down a wrong path for whoever knows how long. In today's world, right, there's this huge need. A lot of our critical infrastructure customers come to Armis and they say, I need you to help with auditing, right? So, in and above simply, let's catalog and discover all my devices. Now let's map all the transactions. Let's build policies, to protect those transactions. What you're talking about, Louverture, is now the real-time auditing. Right. So the yesteryear with the paper maps, there was no auditing. Today with Google Maps, that voice will tell you you've taken a wrong turn, and it will audit for you your trip from A to B, from my house to your house. It will audit that in real time as I'm traversing through that connection. And it will in real time inform me of traffic snarls. It will inform me of road closures. It will inform me of my ETA. So all along the route, I'm continually getting audited. And that's what one of the key components of zero trust is, which is the continual auditing of those connections that are being made, to ensure that it's abiding by the framework that you put in place when you started down this zero trust journey.
Yeah. I think one of the key concepts is that like, for instance, I'll tell you, I'm spoiled, right? I'm spoiled in driving, because now if you've got some of these late model cars, you have things like what they call adaptive driving mode, right? The cool part about the adaptive driving mode is that it's taking in all this information, right? The car or the vehicle is taking in all this information. It's going, hey, it's 30 degrees outside. Could be ice on the road. It's there. I'm going to adjust your power and power distribution so that it does a little bit better on the snow or a freezing road, right? It's telling me then too, hey, you've got gale force winds that's about 15 miles down the road where you normally would travel. Possibility is this, and here it is. This vehicles now have my profile. I get into the car and my name pops up on the screen. Associated with my name now is one, which device do I have, which fob? Two, it has my top 5 places that I go when I jump into the vehicle. 3, it also is now checking the real-time state of those areas, weather, wind, warnings, right? That's associated with that. And then in addition to that, It's also going ahead and doing its own self-assessment of, here's where I am as a vehicle for you. And when we look at this and look at that just kind of capability that's out there to, one, identify me, two, it authorizes me to drive the car as well, because I've already set that up and that security is there. And then three, it has all of that information in context about what it is that I'm doing. Then all of a sudden it pops up the map on the screen and I'm gone, right? And I'm going to my location. I understand what are the dangers and stuff around there. I understand the context of the things that could be dangerous. And then I have some automation that's in place now too, that's adjusting for my own safety, right? And so when we look at that as being the possibility of how you operate a, OT network or enterprise class network that's there, that's how we would like to have our lives as practitioners within this industry, as being able to have that ability, understanding what's there, what's available, who's there, what's their risk, what's the risk of them doing something wrong, what's the risk of something going wrong or something being done wrong to them in that, and basically being able to make the right decisions and correct decisions faster, more accurately, and in some cases preventatively.
Yeah, and so what you're really talking about, obviously, right, is the context, because the context matters. But really, to extract the value of that context, you have to understand the policies that you want to invoke, right? So, what is authentic? What is authorized? What activities do I allow to cross certain boundaries, and what activities don't I allow to cross certain boundaries? And then, that talks about, building out the policies to support the protection of your protect surface. And, those integrations that we make into existing infrastructures that support those policies, whether they be integrations into firewalls and NACs, integrations into CMDBs, integrations into wireless LAN controllers to do remediation, right? So when you hopped into your car, there was a point in time where you probably had to set up some policies, right? You had to give it your name. You had to, maybe identify your phone and link your phone, your Bluetooth into your car.
Absolutely. I geeked out for like an entire 3 or 4 days,
right?
Inside the car, setting up what my thresholds are, right? I even went in and tweaked and customized like the, the sport mode, to the way that I want it, the way I wanted to shift the timing and stuff on it,
right.
All those things. You go in and you customize that. And in that sense, yeah, you're setting that policy, right? You're setting the policy of what you're wanting. You're also setting, hey, do I really want to hear these alerts or not hear these alerts? I've even ranked them, right? Where you've ranked them, you gave them a rating based on your experience as far as from a driving standpoint, and you've set that. And that's that's one of the unique things. And I love where you're going as far as with like the authentication and authorization. There are places where, I authenticated, I had the right stuff to actually get in, but am I actually authorized to do what I'm going to be doing, within there? Right.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Kipling put together this model of the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how of it all. And I don't know if you remember, but I mean, when I was thinking about, conceptually what this means, it brought me back to, I don't know if you remember this from the late 70s, early 80s, or on reruns, the Welcome Back, Kotter. Remember Vinnie Barbarino? He'd walk into his classroom with Mr. Kotter, who was the teacher, and Kotter would ask Vinnie Barbarino, who's John Travolta, a question. And, if he didn't know the answers, he'd lay in who, what, when, where, why, how, just to distract from the conversation. But that Kipling model is really what you had to do when you first got in your car. You had to tell it who you were, and all those different attributes, where you wanted to go, why and how, and all those policy building steps, right, to get the car to your liking. Because what you were trying to do, which is what our OT customers want to do, right? Because there's little assets floating around. I mean, there's not a glut of OT cybersecurity professionals that are just floating around in the ether. These folks are hard to find. So the automation of building, the automation of acting upon what we build is incredibly important, because imagine if you had to get into your car every time and tell it all of those settings every time you got in. You don't want to do that, right? You want it automated. You want it to remember. You want it to act upon what you've told it. Same with protecting our OT infrastructures, right? We want to build policies that are automated, that have the best interests of the protect surface in mind, so that we don't have to triage every time, ransomware hits a SCADA server and then it takes down a PLC, and we now have to triage it and go through that entire process over and over and over. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a policy that blocked that outbound email from that SCADA server from happening in the first place, right? I got a user on that SCADA server who's hitting Gmail across several boundaries, getting into the internet and clicking on a link in an email that brings malware or worse, ransomware into the environment. Wouldn't it be nice just to have a policy that blocked that to begin with, that was triggered by that action of that Gmail user going out and trying to check his email? That way we don't have to spin cycles from resources that we don't have to triage something that shouldn't happen to begin with.
That those things is important. And I think this also goes back to what we usually like to refer to as well, as far as like risk management. In addition to that, the setting up and how we determine where or what we think is probably the best way to do it. It comes from that risk view, right? And I think when we look at zero trust, and how they can be, how it can be really tuned to the micro level. When we take into consideration things like micro segmentation, right? And being able to put that addition into, both the physical as well as into more of our virtual world and stuff too, from a virtual networking standpoint, as well as within, some of our traditional network for, lateral and north and south movement, between our trust zones or trust boundaries. These are some of the things that, over time we've done it with putting in physical firewalls and stuff to be able to measure that. We've done as well, in being able to really put in attributes and ports, protocols, services, or different services, and really trying to stop one service from doing another. Let's say from like peer-to-peer communications on a network. But really, when we talk about trying to put this all together, that was a very disparate way of approaching that. And so as we look to move into the zero trust world, understand that there is some legwork that has to be done. It's not necessarily an easy transition, but once you get the legwork done and you now can set policy based on known devices, attributes, movement, operations, workflow, right, connections and interdependencies there, right? The next step in that case is beginning to look at how do you start to automate those capabilities, and how do you automate them in a way that fits your risk profile as an organization. And that's based on things like your risk assessments or risk management program that's been put in addition to that. And then, so with that said, though, as we move down this road here of zero trust, and you guys are going to be a very big part of this, and you already talked about it. There's organizations that may come to you from an audit reason standpoint, but then also realize that, hey, we can make our lives a bit easier by really beginning to accept and really beginning to implement, this zero trust capability, and really kind of push really that as kind of the future of security for these organizations, because otherwise it's going to be hard to keep up. Large global organizations, even smaller ones, it's going to be hard to keep up with both the demand, the risk and threat of ransomware within organizations, and not just ransomware, it's just the risk and threat of cybersecurity in general. And so with that, how do organizations move ahead from a future of security standpoint? Is this the future of security? You think this is going to sustain, or how long do you think, zero trust will be it? Or do you see also a transitioning coming in the next 5 years too?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see the zero trust framework evolving over time. I think there's a very clear reason why zero trust after 13 years or so is gaining momentum again. And that's because the solutions of the past obviously aren't effective. When we look at all the breaches and the ransomwares, we look at pipelines being turned down, we look at meat packing facilities, we look at bottling facilities all coming under attack and having to turn down their operations. It's clear that the solutions of the past, as built as silos and then implemented as silos, is not working to support each other. And there's ways around that. There's gaps. And our adversaries are finding those gaps. It's clear. I mean, that's why, again, just a couple of weeks ago, the Office of the President put out this directive around zero trust framework around the U.S. government. It's because we have to take this approach that we must never trust any device or anyone, and we must continually verify the device, the person, and the activities that those devices are and those people are engaging in. So do I think moving forward, we're going to be having more and more conversations about zero trust? Absolutely. Will the framework evolve? It has to evolve. And I think it has to evolve into something that is more digestible, right? Right now, again, it's this nebulous concept. But how do we operationalize zero trust? And, I especially in brownfield, when you look at brownfield deployments, a lot of our critical infrastructure is decades and decades old. We don't have the luxury of building out new plants and new facilities and new pipelines and new substations and distribution networks in our electrical in our electrical grid. We don't have the luxury of building greenfield where we can deploy zero trust as a brand new shiny object across that new deployment. We have obviously all the brownfield deployments that are there. So how do you address that, right? How do you double back? And I sort of liken it to, if I'm a contractor, I'd rather build a house and then call up my HVAC vendor and say, hey, come install a killer HVAC that is secure, as opposed to going in and doing a remodel where I've got to go look at all the duct work, right? Look at all the work that needs to be done to replace that HVAC system in this brownfield house. You'd much rather build greenfield, but you don't have the choice. And we don't have the choice. We've got brownfield, 99% of all deployments, obviously are brownfield with, a very small percentage being new builds. So we have to address what is already in our purview. And, to start, we see the first step that, we're hoping gets people off the starting block is you need to take an asset inventory of everything that you've got and understand all of its communications, all of its connections, all of your users, the devices, the source, the destinations, so that you can have a framework for understanding what your protect surface is, so that you can then move forward to actually protect it.
I live in Florida, and one of the things that is absolutely hated and most dreaded in Florida is that if you live in a house that's fairly old, built in the 80s and 70s, right? Your pipes and stuff are going actually through the slab. So your plumbing is through the cement slab that's under the house, or that really there's no access to it, right? And one of the other keys to this is that if somebody fixes a pipe in your house, there's no warranty on their work because they can't guarantee that there's not another leak somewhere else or another issue with that. So how we resolve it is that usually older homes, we run now a different type of plastic / rubberish cable or piping through the walls and then up through the attics in the homes in order to repipe it. We don't repipe under the house. We just build a whole nother piping system through the house, right? And it works. It reroutes it. It takes care of the issues and stuff. It helps you work around some of the legacy and, let's say, technically brownfield areas there, right? While you're still using some of that, you're still able to modernize on top of that, right? And that's one of the keys as far as thinking through the industry of, how do you look at, okay, here's the basic operations that you need to achieve, but here's also the base security efforts or base security goals that we have as an organization, or imperatives, I guess, is really how security comes,
Yeah.
right? And that's what you have to do, is then look at how do you build those on top of that. We know there's been major investment over 50 years and stuff in some of these things. So you do have to figure out how to work around those. And again, it's not an easy button for it, but it is time where organizations have to start thinking about that, because you got to build it in. Ransomware is evolving. The distribution method for ransomware is getting more complex and is able to take advantage of significant opportunities, because basically when you look at things like utilities or transmission and distribution, or even power generation and stuff too at this point, demand continues to grow for those areas. Demand keeps growing for products and stuff. So yeah, while you're trying to still provide the basic services and products and stuff that's there through your manufacturing or even through your power distribution, yeah, you're going to have to begin to bolt on additional capabilities and technology in order to begin to incrementally modernize, on that. But while you're doing that, this is where you can begin to implement aspects of zero trust. You're not going to get it all in at one time, but you're going to have to build it incrementally, because ransomware distribution and its ability to, get into different places now it's astronomical. We've been discussing that over other podcasts and stuff too here. We did a whole series on this back in December, and it's very much so a more complex environment, but it's easier now for adversaries to be able to infiltrate your organization, OT and stuff too, through those means. And it usually comes through not just your old equipment, but also through new software and stuff that you're adding that you can't really do any detection and maintenance or management of, because you don't have that capability also within that OT environment.
Yeah, and as you look at the analogy that you gave with regards to the Florida home on the slab and rerouting, whether it be electric, whether it be natural gas, whether it be water, is you have to be uber concerned, especially when you talk about our utilities, our pipelines, our critical manufacturing. You've got to be uber concerned that there's no disruption of existing services, right? So you've got all these brownfield deployments, and you want to overlay a technology like zero trust. How do you ensure that there is zero disruption of service, right? How can you be assured that what this zero trust vendor is offering up is completely passive, that there is zero downtime? And that is a very interesting concept that we have those conversations with our customers all the time. And one of the very first questions they ask is, obviously, we're running a brownfield environment. Assure me that anything you do on my network is not going to lead to any disruption of service, because that disruption could be the disruption of the delivery of electricity, of water, of natural gas services. It could be a disruption of critical manufacturing facilities. It could be the disruption of a number of any one of the 16 CISA named critical verticals. So the ability to engage in these types of conversations, then hopefully ultimately solutions, oftentimes revolves around at least at Armis's ability to do this completely passively, right? To do this without inserting into a production environment, without ever having to probe these devices, and the ability to ensure our customers that this is actually happening completely passive, and there is no need to insert into these critical processes at all, is a huge driver. Because when you insert into brownfield environments, their job is to keep the lights on and to keep the conveyors moving. They don't want interruptions in their services.
Yeah, and to that point, those are, these are situations that are very serious. Like we could talk very easily about it right here. There's some brownfield environments that are very sensitive to things like ICMP, pings and stuff from that, in which case you're, sending a certain signal to get an acknowledgement from from a PLC, and all of a sudden you drop that PLC, or worse yet, a refrigerator, right? A refrigerator that has medicines and stuff too. If you're a pharmaceutical manufacturer or so, and they have that's sitting on a network in that case, and in some cases that can take down that particular device, or it can take down that particular refrigerator, which causes quality issues or catastrophic issues with a large set of medicines or whichever. So these are things that I've seen in the past when you're introducing new technology, but people want assurances now when they're getting ready to move into the direction of zero trust, that's not going to happen. And so I think that the industry, and in particular organizations like Armis and the solutions and stuff from that, have taken that into better account now. So as you move through those conversations, and those are absolutely important questions to ask, but we've seen that industry has began to solve those issues, right? We're definitely much more farther ahead on that, in which there is a higher assurance now that you're not going to take down a critical process, right? Or part of a critical infrastructure and stuff with that as you introduce these.
Yeah, certainly. And the government has even inserted itself into these processes, like, right, with our, SAFE, and different metrics that our electric utilities have to abide by with regards to outages and outage restoration and restoral times of power outages. There's fines, right? There's money on the line. Mm-hmm. If in this example, our utilities don't match the bar that have been set by either maybe a PUC, a regulatory commission, a utilities commission, or the federal government. So yeah, when we're talking about uptime and then restoral of uptime, that's how these folks are measured, right? They're measured in continuity of services, when a vendor comes along and is suggesting an insertion of a technology that potentially gets some ears perked up, whether it's by NERC SIP folks, whether it's by SADI or CAFE folks that are measuring, resiliency across their distribution networks. That's something that has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah,
because there's money on the line, and unfortunately, that's seemingly what most everything comes down to these days.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about that from a power utility standpoint, and then if you take this over to the, manufacturing industry, or in manufacturing and stuff too, the same thing. If you've got a high price product or a high price piece of material that you need to have cut, molded, and and machined and stuff from there, if you get that wrong, guess what? You're going to eat some of that cost when it comes to those materials. Right?
That's right. And who they're going to look at? They're going to look at the plant floor manager, the operations manager, and say, what happened? And then the plant floor manager, the operations manager, hopefully they have an answer. But, what you don't want happening is everybody then looking around back and forth to everybody around them and not having an answer as to why that manufacturing process stopped. Did it stop because there's a mechanical, breakage in some of the equipment on that line? Did it happen because there was a command and control activity against a piece of that critical infrastructure? Why did that happen? So obviously having the controls in place to identify, at least on the cyber side and on the activity side, with regards to those command and control actions taken against those machines, super important to have the answers as to why did that happen.
When working with some of you guys are working with some of the leading, power and utilities, whether it's munis or commercial utilities and stuff from that, as well as with some of the different, oversight and commissions and stuff too that are associated with those. As you work with that, and I want you to kind of, you don't have to name any names or anything like that, but what are some of the drawbacks that you see are really holding organizations back right now and really understanding on how to, one, implement zero trust, but two, being able to start the process of this. So what are some of the downfalls you've seen, of late when you kind of look at this, this arena right now?
I think a lot of folks, a lot of organizations have really stalled their efforts to move their security posture forward. I think, many folks are looking, in the utility space at NERC CIP as the end all and be all of what they need to abide by, because as long as they abide by it, they're not going to get fined. But I think that that leaves a lot on the table, because I do not believe that those organizations and their operations departments, their generation, their transmission, their distribution networks in the utility space, the upstream, the midstream, the downstream pipeline providers, I don't believe that they have all in lockstep moved together to evolve the risk posture of their assets. Because let's remember, a lot of these assets were deployed decades ago. They show up, they're not even running encryption. There's weak authentication against these devices. There's certainly no PKI or certificate infrastructure against these devices. And that was okay, because the risks weren't necessarily coming from cyber when they were installed. They were coming from human or on-prem or local risks of somebody plugging in, or somebody, causing a malfunction locally to a device. So, these devices that have been in these networks for decades were placed when the concern wasn't cyber. Well, guess what? Now it's cyber. And now we've got a weak underbelly of all these devices that are now, they're not boundaried, they're not segmented. Most all of them are there's no air gap to be seen anywhere. So, but they're still abiding by some of the same frameworks of when they initially deployed these devices. And I don't think that we have all taken a step forward to address the fact that times are changed. These devices, albeit they're critical, they're not being protected as they should, because when they were deployed, they were fairly weak in posture with regards to, their resiliency. And I think that's coming to roost. I think it's all coming back around. I think that's why you see a great many of these ransomware attacks against critical infrastructures hitting OT, because it's no surprise that these devices do have a weak underbelly, and if we haven't invested the time to fortify those borders and boundaries, then these devices, unfortunately, and their operations are there for the taking.
Yeah, Keith, I think an important part as we get ready to close the show here for today, and one area too that we'll go back into as far as offering solutions. But one of the things I want to leave the listeners with is this: we have a very large problem when it comes to our critical infrastructure in the U.S. We have a very large problem when it comes to good security in manufacturing, and here's the reason why. Again, you have old components, old technology, and you have this environment too, in which we've so long depended on, in some cases, very old and outdated policies to make us feel better. We even audit in a lot of cases to very old policies and standards from that end that are not necessarily applicable to actually keeping that environment safe anymore. This world evolves much faster than you can get a policy through either Congress or through a particular controlling body or organization or DHS. Life and technology move much faster than that. It's well ahead, right? So even though you're being audited for different things, or you're talking about NERC CIP, if you're talking about even your NIST audits and stuff too that you're doing, or ISO, or in some other cases, some of the other, IEEE areas and stuff too that's out there, right? At the end of the day, those move much slower than what technology and capabilities are. And this is where organizations have got to take that next step of going, look, identify the problem, identify what are innovative fixes for some of the most complex issues that are out there, and begin the process of evaluating it. But if you just say that, hey, what we have is enough, just remember, enough is not going to be enough if that glass keeps growing, right? You can fill a glass, up all the way to the top, But if you go ahead and add another glass, or if you go ahead and add another gallon to that, you're not filling it up. Enough is not enough at that point. So remember, you've got to keep on moving and keep moving and progressing as far as in your security, because our adversaries are each and every day, and they're becoming more and more successful as time goes by. And that's all for this episode of the LoJo Show. Thank you to Keith for coming on with us again. We appreciate him joining and sharing his experience with us. We have really enjoyed this multi-part series with Armis. Our next episode will be our last with Keith for now. We appreciate him coming on and Armis' partnership for this series. If you have enjoyed this series, please let us know on social media. If you follow our social media, you can get some great info on current events, find resources for your education and awareness, and connect with us. If you want to come on the show, you can send us a message on any social media platform or on our website at www.blackinchtech.com. Thank you for joining us. But for now, we have to say goodbye. Have a great week, stay safe, and stay secure.